So now we're going to another amazing group of leaders, a really group of remarkable women who are presenting on this next panel, implementing the Escazu Agreement, protecting women land defenders and the defense of nature in Latin America and the Caribbean region. Thank you to all of the leaders who have done critical work in this effort for this incredibly important multilateral agreement. And I wanted to say that this topic has come up over the last days of the assembly around the fact of frontline leaders, frontline land defenders, and particularly women in all of their diversity standing up for water, for forests, to stop mining, to stop deforestation, to stop fossil fuel projects, and the threats that come from that. As many of you may know, Latin America is one of the deadliest regions in the world for land defenders, and attacks and criminalization of women protecting their territories and communities is very specific, as you will hear about on this panel. Yet these same women and gender diverse leaders are central to solutions. In 2023, Global Witness reported that at least 166 land and environmental defenders were killed in Latin America, with Colombia remaining the deadliest country. Indigenous communities are disproportionately targeted, representing 43% of those killed globally in 2023. Tragically, impunity for perpetrators remains a major problem. So in this assembly, we are clearly calling to defend the defenders, and this is also in our call to action. We must all stand to defend the defenders of the land. We are also highlighting that many studies have shown that the most effective way to protect biodiverse regions, such as the Amazon rainforest, which is central in the fight to mitigate the worst impacts of the climate crisis, is to protect the rights and sovereignty of Indigenous peoples and local communities. So it's imperative to implement policies such as those included in the Escazu Agreement that are working to ensure human and Indigenous rights and the protection of environmental defenders, and to ensure access to environmental information. Along with many others, WECAN has been advocating for the Escazu Agreement for many years, and on November 5th, 2020, it was fully ratified and entered into force on April 22nd, 2021. So that was a huge victory for all of us, and really amazing that this legislation was passed. The agreement is a groundbreaking multilateral accord that can help protect women land defenders who are under attack and preserve biodiverse ecosystems across Latin America and the Caribbean region. And at WECAN, we are engaged in a multifaceted strategy to ensure strong implementation of the agreement. Our campaign involves education for women land defenders about the agreement, and to this end, we have developed Escazu Agreement toolkits for women land defenders and frontline communities in different languages, a resource designed to help women land defenders navigate the domestic laws of their countries to achieve the protections of the agreement. And we're going to put those links to the toolkit in the chat. We've also been developing collaboration with attorneys to assist in developing the most effective plans for implementation of the Escazu Agreement, country by country, with the support of our partners at the Advance Center, and then also advocating with LAC governments for strong implementation of the agreement. And with that, please let me introduce this truly amazing group of women who have been champions and leaders of this fight for the Escazu Agreement. And first, we're going to be hearing from Patricia Madrigal Cordero. She's a former Vice Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. Then we'll be hearing from Ruth Spencer, the Deputy Chair of Marine Ecosystems Protected Areas Trust from Antigua and Barbuda. Then we'll be hearing from Fanny Castro, who is Utoto and is the General Coordinator of the Coordinating Body of Indigenous Organizations of the Amazon Basin, COICA. She's from Colombia. Then we'll be hearing from Patricia Galinga, who is a Quechua leader from Sariaco. She's a spokeswoman for Amazon Women in Defense of the Jungle and is also our honored WECAN coordinator in the Ecuadorian Amazon from Ecuador. And then we'll be hearing from Miriam Miranda Chamorro, who is Garfuna and is the Executive Director of the Black Fraternal Organization of Honduras from Honduras. And with that, we will be now hearing from Patricia Madrigal Cordero.
Me siento muy honrada por esta invitación. La asamblea.
I feel very honored to be in this assembly towards the COP30 that is organizing the fight for climate justice and land. Greetings to this group of courageous women fighting for a better world, who are leading important processes that deserve to be shared and strengthened. We are in this panel talking about the Escazu agreement, and I wanted to mention that the Escazu agreement is an international instrument that protects people's right to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. It was adopted close to San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica, in the town of Escazu in 2018, and it entered into force into 2021, and currently it has 17 participating countries. The fourth pillar of the Escazu agreement is found in Article 9, which establishes the obligation of member states to guarantee a safe and supportive environment in which individuals, groups, and organizations that promote and defend human rights in environmental matters can act without threats, restrictions, and insecurity. The most important thing is to prevent these attacks, but if they do occur, they must be investigated and punished so that defenders of human rights and environmental matters can do their job. The types of attacks and threats include a variety of actions for them and their organizations and their families. Under the Escazu agreement, the first conference of the parties in 2022 established an open-ended ad hoc group, which has held 3 forums for environmental defenders in Ecuador in 2022, Panama 2023, and most recently in St. Kitts and Nevis, to hear from the public about their worries and views. The decision 3.2 that was adopted at the third conference of the parties of the Escazu agreement in 2024 approved the action plan for the next 6 years until 2030. This action plan is structured around 4 related and complementary priorities: knowledge generation, recognition, strengthening capacities, cooperation for national implementation of the action plan, and evaluation. At the same time, the conference 2024 parties approved the decision 3-4 on mainstreaming and gender perspective, and it encourages parties to promote the full and effective participation of women in all their diversity, including indigenous women, and the incorporation of a gender equality lens in both the implementation of the Escazu agreement and a national implementation plans and maps. The Escazu agreement considers vulnerable individuals and groups as a sector that requires special attention. In Latin America and the Caribbean, women are vulnerable and marginalized, and so the adoption of a gender perspective is understood as an important issue to consider in the implementation of the agreement. The Secretariat of the Escazu Agreement and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ELAC, is developing, with the support of the United Nations agencies like UN Women, a guide for mainstreaming the gender perspective in the implementation of the Escazu Agreement, to be presented at the next ordinary meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Between January and February of this year, input was collected through an online questionnaire in January and February of this year. The preliminary annotated index proposal is currently available online for consultation until June 3rd of this year. This annotated index is based on structural issues identified, for example, that environmental information produced by states at the national, regional, and local levels, as well as by private companies, is usually written in high specialized language. And summary reports or reports aimed at the general public are not commonly available. This means that the right to access to the information is not fully realized. We have many obstacles that we need to identify first, because the fact that cultural practices continue to reinforce women's confinement to private spaces rather than public spaces, limiting their access to participation. The difficulties in accessing justice due to direct and indirect costs of doing so, the type of language used, and the length of proceedings, among other factors. Women environmental defenders suffer from patriarchal, discriminatory, and violent cultural patterns and the predominance of a culture of privilege. They are frequently stigmatized as opponents of development, assaulted, and mistreated.
That's why implementation plans for the Escazu Agreement must find ways to allow for the full exercise of our rights in the region. And the consideration of the gender perspective in terms of the governance of the agreement have been considered. The committee, so we have a committee to support the implementation and compliance of the Escazu Agreement, and this also includes 3 women and 3 men who were elected to serve as representatives of the public. The committee is a subsidiary body of the Conference of the Parties to the Escazu Agreement, and its role is to support the member states and the public in implementing and complying with the agreement. This committee can take complaints from governments and from the public regarding non-compliance with the Escazu Agreement by member states. And it also has powers in cases where situations of risk are detected in relation to possible attacks, threats, or intimidation against members of the public who have submitted complaints. It can take one or more of the following measures. 1, measures for priority attention to cases. This means altering the order in which cases are considered, convening an extraordinary session, considering admissibility and substance jointly, and also others like requesting that the state involved submit information and perspectives faster, and issuing conclusions on the case as a matter of priority. So there are also, this is the second one, protective measures in favor of the public. This includes safeguarding the identity of the person who made the complaint, recommending that the person who made the complaint seek recourse to a national or international mechanism for protection, recommending in advance to the state involved that it take necessary measures to safeguard members of the public in situations of risk in their immediate environment, and also report on the situation to the Executive Board of the Escazu Agreement, the national focal points designated by member states, and the United Nations country team and various other UN agencies and programs and other national institutions. So before taking appropriate protective measures, the committee must consult with the person who made the complaint, and it must take into account the circumstances of the person concerned and their environment. And we really need to unite all voices and efforts to fight inequality and discrimination for a better life for everyone.
So important. So glad to hear from Patricia Cordero. And, we wanted to start this session with really understanding from a government perspective what is going on and give people more background about the Escazu Agreement. And so we're really thankful for that presentation. And now I would love to bring Ruth Spencer into the conversation to share what is going on in your country and the work that you've been doing on the agreement, and how this is really serving women land defenders. Thank you, Ruth, for joining us.
Thank you, Osprey. Thanks for the invitation, and it's good to give me a voice in this process. I'm representing local community groups, and the Escazu Agreement gives us power. It hands the power back to the people. So we have to keep our governments accountable when they have ratified the agreement, so that all the benefits, all the principles that are in place can be transferred to us, the people. I'd like to pay respect to the many human rights defenders that have been killed all over the world. It's so sad to know that when they stand up to protect our environment, the health of people, our ecosystems, that they are killed for these actions. But the next side of the coin is that after the destruction has taken place, we have the governments at these global forums asking for money, asking for finance, asking for technical resources to restore these same things that these environmental defenders were killed for. It's not fair. We cannot afford to keep losing lives that are protecting what is God has blessed us with. So we have to ensure that as CSOs, as citizens, as local people, we hold the governments accountable. I am from Antigua, and I've been privileged to have been attending and participating in many of the negotiations for the Escazu Agreement. And I've been attending also implementation roadmaps. In the Eastern Caribbean, all the small islands of the Caribbean have ratified, and we have gone through processes looking at the legal regulations to ensure that they conform with the principles of the Escazu Agreement. In some countries, we have had to put new laws in place. But I went to the rolled out in Belize. I went to the one in Grenada. A few weeks ago, I attended the one in St. Kitts. And what we see is that the governments, they realize that they alone cannot make all these environmental decisions. They need the people. And this is why the Escazu Agreement came into place, because after the Rio 1992 convention, government said they couldn't do it alone, but it has taken so many years for the Escazu Agreement to come into force. And now that we have it in force, we have to use it. Many times I write to development banks, I write to agencies, and I get no response. But I always use the Escazu Agreement. And soon after I get a response. The Escazu is powerful. It brings power to the people. And with the global situation now in chaos, governments are returning to the local groups to get our ecosystems back in place. I just came from Colombia last week with the Global Land Forum, where the Colombian government is giving back their ancestral lands to the indigenous people, to the Afro-descendants. Many land titles are now put in place. And this is revealing, it's telling us that the change is taking place. The transformational change that we have long desired is taking place. But we as CSOs, local community groups, indigenous people, we have to push our governments, keep at them, let them know that they have ratified and they owe it to the people to put the principles and the procedures in place. For the human rights defenders, governments are adopting new legislation to protect the people. We should not be seen as busybodies, having no say in decision-making processes. Escazu gives us a voice, and we have to use this good to save the health of the people, the health of the economy, so that we can go forward, stopping the conflict, living in a peaceful, just society. Thank you, Osprey, for allowing me to have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. We really appreciate your leadership, and it's been so good to see you at the different government negotiations. And we always support your voice and work and your strength in all the things that you do, and particularly with the Escazu agreement and standing up for your communities. And thank you for your powerful, powerful voice. And now I would like to bring into the conversation Fanny Castro. And we'd love to hear from you, Fanny, just reminding people that you have your interpretation globe on the right bottom hand of your screen. Please go ahead, Fanny, you have the floor. Wonderful to see you.
Gracias, Osprey, de verdad.
Thank you, Osprey. I am so thankful for your great work, your tireless work to make visible what women are doing to defend rights and to defend biodiversity in our territories. And thanks for your support in all of our struggles. It's very important for us to have allies like you who, in the day-to-day, are taking these kinds of actions that really, really touch the social consciousness. And we want to be making decisions that benefit humanity. For example, territories free of extractivism and fossil fuels. Thank you so much for that. I also want to thank my colleagues here on the panel, and especially thank you, Patricia, for discussing the origins of the Escazu agreement. So this instrument is really unique in Latin America for men and women environmental and human rights defenders. So as Patricia said, this agreement is very important for us, and it's also an important thing for indigenous peoples and for women leaders in the territories. And really, it's not just a verbal thing. It's not just on paper. This is really part of the work that women are doing in the territories, in their day-to-day. They are connected with the land, and they are doing real defense in their day-to-day lives. They are the ones who are taking care of the territories, who are restoring degraded lands. And they are the ones who are also protecting and taking action in the territories. And so they're often treated, sadly, as less important in international spaces. For example, in the implementation plan of the Escazu agreement, the issue of gender and the issue of women's needs to be approached in a cross-cutting way. When we look at a cross-cutting or an intersectional approach, we need to have that, because otherwise, really the issue of women or gender is going to continue to be sort of a side issue. We want it interwoven into things. So it's really important for Latin American countries adopt this agreement and really bring it into their national level legislation. Chile, Bolivia, Mexico, all of these different countries. And it's not just about including it in our national laws, but it's also looking at how to truly implement this in reality in these places where the information sometimes is not reaching, and information from these places often doesn't get out either. For example, the issue of violence that our women are living through in our territories. There is an underreporting of violence against women, and it's not just femicides. It's not just violence that is done to women because they're environmental and human rights defenders. There is a political and structural violence that is faced by women, and particularly indigenous women. And this is very, very sad. It's very unfortunate. Often, even in the community setting or in organizational settings, this kind of violence can exist. And so the situation of Indigenous women and the situation of young people, young women in particular, is really constantly at risk. And as Osprey said at the beginning, especially in Colombia, in Brazil, and places where there are especially high levels of violence in the territories. And it has a lot to do with the extractivist processes, the fossil fuel companies and others that come in and they violate the rights of the people in our communities, and they often cause illness because of the chemicals that are used in extracting oil and gas, and in illegal mining, also drug trafficking, because there are often fumigations, and they really contaminate our territories. So not only are women exposed to that physical violence by actors from the state or from the margins, but also our women are affected by other forms of violence. And I always say there are populations that are at great risk of physical extinction, because all of this poisoning that we see happening, it affects people's food sovereignty in Indigenous communities and their health as well. And some women end up sterile, they're unable to have children. To me, that is like a silent genocide that we need to really look at, because we could have Indigenous communities that disappear and nobody realizes it. And so there is a lack of reporting of the many forms of violence that women are facing. Sometimes there are also data and official statistics, and still people don't do anything. It's as if the issue of women and violence against women were just something that nobody's interested in. That's why it's so important to continue with the struggles that WECAN is involved with, and all the women who have spoken here, to make visible the situations that exist on the ground. And women are fighters. We have lots of high expectations. For example, I am hoping to go to COP30 in Belém do Pará, Brazil, and there's a lot of high expectations among women. These days, women are readying themselves from their different contexts to become the primary voices from the territories. And we want our demands to be responded to. And this includes demands with regard to the impacts of climate change and life and biodiversity in the territories. This also affects the vital liquid of water, for which the Amazon is so important. And women are bringing their voices to these international spaces now from the territories. We want our comrades, our women present. We want to accompany them. We want to make sure that they're able to talk about what's happening, and that their central role in protecting their ancestral territories is recognized. We want them heard. We want them included in decision-making spaces and negotiations that are carried out in the space, including in the space of the COP30, which is coming up at the end of this year, and in all of the different settings where we women need to be present. Thank you very much. Thanks, Osprey.
Thank you very much, Fanny, for your incredible leadership. For those of you who are not familiar, COICA is a major formation in Latin America, and it's, speaking of women's role, it's very courageous and powerful that Fanny is in that position, which is not easy for her. And so we really respect your leadership and thank you for your courage and standing up. And yeah, I think it's just so important to recognize and just take a moment to really imagine what it's like to be some of these women who are on the front lines of protecting their territories with their bodies. We have many, many stories and allies of, so many allies that we have talked to about what this means for them, and the connection between the women knowing that the land is their body, their future, their life, their connection. And imagine being in that place where your home is being attacked at that level, where you are risking your own life to protect your community, your children, the land, and the next generations. And I just wanted to highlight just taking a moment to understand real lives, real women who are in this experience, and that it is very specific for them because it also includes things that that others don't experience. As an example, sexual violence or threats to families. It's really compounded certain kinds of threats because of sexual orientation as well. So with that, I would love to bring Patricia Galinga into the conversation. And I did introduce you earlier, Patricia, but I also wanted to take a moment to celebrate and acknowledge that you have been very recently appointed as an advisor on Indigenous issues at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And so I just really want to acknowledge your new role in that and congratulate you. And they have picked absolutely the right person to do that. So with that, Patricia Galinga, please, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Osprey, for always giving us a space to raise our voices through WECAN, for those of us women who are on the front lines. The situation of the Amazonian biome is urgent, and this has a lot to do with the Escazu Agreement. It's worrisome because we haven't been able to stop the extractivism that is being carried out in Amazonian territories. That includes mining extractivism and illegal mining, but also oil extractivism. And there's a lot of open pit mining. Some of it's illegal, some of it's legal, but it shouldn't be. And we women, when we raise our voices, we often end up criminalized. We end up threatened. We end up persecuted. And I want to say that apart from being defenders, we're also Indigenous defenders. So we have multiple levels of stigmatization that we face. One for being women, another is being Indigenous, and then also for having dared to raise our voices. And so we face these stigmatizations in our national contexts, and also we women in our organizations and efforts aren't given the value that we deserve. And there are lots of agreements, of course, in the world, including the Escazu Agreement. This is good because it gives us tools for our struggles that we women are carrying out. And we women have seen that it's important to organize ourselves from our own perspectives, because many times women's perspectives regarding the fight against climate change and extractivism are not listened to in the way that they should be. And I always say that if we were to listen to women, then things would really change within organizations. If we were to include women in decision-making, in participatory decision-making, we would be already in a process of change that would generate really deep transformation. And we wouldn't be in this environmental chaos that we're in now. We know that the Amazon is at a grave threat. We are in a crisis. Our rivers are contaminated. We see that central governments are allowing this to happen, and they're allowing extractivist activities to be carried out in our territories. And so what we Indigenous women want to do is we want to empower ourselves with the right tool, the necessary tool, to do our work and work with allies who can help us at critical moments. So we've seen that many times they try to delegitimize women when they raise their voices. They try to take women out of the spaces where decisions are made. And companies are really good at that. Corporations and extractivist corporations really study the psychology, the anthropology of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women, and they look for the ways to discredit the women here. And we've seen it happen with lots of women leaders. And that's why we've gotten together as a group to try to sustain and defend our realities. And so we see that when one of our woman comrades raises her voice, she's often threatened, but we don't want to be afraid when we face threats because we know that we have people behind us, we have teams behind us, we know that our communities and families can defend us. And this is the reality that we're facing in Latin America. Environmental and human rights defenders, women in Latin America, we're facing this reality. And I am afraid that they might open up the southeastern route through our country of Ecuador. I've lived here for a long time. And we've seen that we're able to expel these companies. But now they're trying to convince us of something new that shouldn't happen. We have shown that we will not be bought. We will not be bought and sold. Life is not negotiable. Life needs to be defended. It's not an economic good. We indigenous peoples are the ones who are nourishing the planetary system still. And if they destroy these vital ecosystems, they will destroy life on Earth and life of humanity in general. And that's why it's so important. That's why we women are raising our voices. We need to keep doing it. And we must say, we will not accept any more extractivism in our territory. And that's why the Escazu Agreement helps us by providing laws and elements there that can support us. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Patty. Really appreciate the hard work that you're doing and all the work of the women at Sariaco and also Mujeres Amazonica, which is a group that Patricia leads. So many incredible, powerful women in the Amazon protecting that territory for all of us and at great risk. And so it's very important that we support all of the women who've spoken today in their leadership, standing up for their communities, and also to understand the role of the Escazu Agreement and why we need to keep having more and more regulations and laws to protect the land defenders. And this is something that we're very concerned about at WECAN for the LAC region. And we have this opportunity with the Escazu Agreement, but also all over the world. Here in the United States, all over the world, people standing up to live life, to protect nature, to protect their communities, to protect water, to protect forests, to stop mining, to stop deforestation, to stop harms. The insanity that we are criminalizing people standing up for the web of life, that we're fighting our own governments, we're fighting our own financial institutions to live. This is, I know no other way to say it, but this is absolutely insane. And it's one of the reasons we are having this assembly and people around the world doing so much work in collaboration is that we have to stop this frame of reference, these policies, this ideology of destruction to the planet. And it also reflects deeply in a historical relationship of violence against the land and violence against women. And this is part of the patriarchal ideology and idea of supremacy that we are working so hard to shift. So we need these practical policies that can help us make these shifts while we support the frontline women who are on the ground doing the work and risking it all. And I wanted to take a moment to show a website page that we have so that people listening in, especially a lot of the land defenders we know who are on this call and listening on the live streams, we're going to take a moment and show the toolkits that we have so people can actually see them. We're going to do a little screen share here, and then we're going to go back to our panelists to hear more from them. But we wanted just to take a moment, if you could scroll down a little bit. These are the different toolkits from different countries. And you can see from Brazil, from Colombia, from Ecuador, and you can see how, and from Peru, different countries, how each of these toolkits, when you open them up, they are in the home language of that country. And it really goes through explaining what is the Escazu Agreement and how can you use this mechanism if you are a land defender. who can you reach out to for pro bono legal services? Because of course, if you're going to be represented and you're under threat, you also need to be represented most likely by an attorney to follow up on your case. And so it really, the reports really walk you through an explanation of what is the Escazu Agreement, how it also relates to your country's laws, because of course each country has its own unique laws, but how does the Escazu Agreement fit into your local country laws? And then again, how to reach out for support if you're under threat. So I just wanted to share that, a very practical tool. I have an opportunity with this global audience to ensure that we actually have mechanisms and methodologies and tools to implement the Escazu Agreement. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now I would like to go through and give each of the presenters an opportunity to comment further about the Escazu Agreement, now that you might have had some reflections from some of the other speakers. I'd like to go back to you, Ruth Spencer, and give you the floor for any closing comments for this panel. Thank you so much for being with us, Ruth. Did we lose Ruth? I don't think I see her online here. Okay, let's move to Fanny. Fanny, would you like to have the floor again so that we could hear from you before we close out the panel?
Hola.
Thank you very much for the space. It is a really unique space that we have here. And I just wanted to call on Indigenous and non-Indigenous women. I wanted to say that I think violence has no borders. It doesn't have a particular race or credo. And often just simply because we're women, we face violence, and we need to really unite forces and defend life above all, and continue moving forward with these types of activities, which are so important. I think that this event is scheduled to help us think toward COP30 in Belém, and it's really important for women to be present there, speaking and being present in decision-making spaces, participating not in a symbolic way, but in a really substantive way, because we are the messengers of well-being and harmony with nature and life itself, based on our perspective, a maternal type of perspective. We are defenders of life. And I really wanted to thank all of my comrades here. I wanted to thank Patricia again for her new role in the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We are here to support you. I am so glad that you have gotten to this stage. And so we really want to support women in all spaces. And with Osprey, we will continue to join forces so that we continue to elevate women's voices. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fanny. And I'm really glad that you brought up, the Escazu Agreement in relationship to COP30, because to be sure, this is going to be part of the conversation. It's part of our call to action. It's part of the work we need to do with the Gender Action Plan that is part of the UNFCCC process now, that we ensure that gender equity, protection of women land defenders is part of this process. We're going to be in Belém, Brazil. We're going to be talking about the Amazon. We're going to be in Amazonian region. It would be so inappropriate, disgraceful, and wrong if we did not talk about the land defenders when we are in the LAC region, in the Latin America, Caribbean region. And so I couldn't agree more that I think we all need to really collect together and make sure that the Escazu Agreement has a central role at COP30, and that we elevate land defenders and the attacks against land defenders and how that must be stopped, and that we stop the criminalization and threats to women during COP30. I think it's an amazing opportunity that we all need to continue to prepare for, have sessions on, make sure that there are events highlighting this important issue. And I look forward to collaborating and working with you all on that. And we have time, Patricia Galinga, for a closing comment from you. And we're just so glad we have this opportunity to be with you. Thank you, Patty. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks very much, Osprey. This is a very important space because it's an opportunity for women to speak and be heard. Thank you for congratulating me on the role at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I think we need to make a difference so that more women can be in these spaces, and so that women who are frontline defenders can continue fighting and providing the elements that will allow more young people and more women to get involved. Because I think that to change the world, we need women's strength. The world is the way it is because it has been nearly entirely dominated by patriarchal governments, and women's energies have been relegated to a lower status. And I think that it's so essential for women to continue participating and being strengthened. So thank you for this space that allows us to unite from different places around the world and get to know each other. I think that at COP30 in Brazil, we will have delegations of women trying to do advocacy so that there is more women's spokespersons and more women's advocacy in those spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, the incredible dedication and courage that you all have for this work. And let's stand together to defend the defenders. Let's stand together to defend the defenders and protect the women on the front lines. And I look forward to organizing with all of you. And thank you again for this important conversation. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close this panel. And we'll be taking a short break between now and the panel that comes in about 10 minutes. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much.